We begin in New York, where Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been speaking to the United Nations General Assembly. He praised Donald Trump after the U.S. president unexpectedly reversed his position, now saying Ukraine could liberate all of its territory from Russian occupation. In his address, Zelenskyy thanked the U.S. for its support, but Ukrainians at home have their doubts.
While President Zelenskyy was lighting and fighting diplomatic fires at the UN, Ukraine's emergency services continued to extinguish the flames from Russian drone strikes.
You know perfectly well international law doesn't work fully unless you have powerful friends who are truly willing to stand up for it. There are no security guarantees except friends and weapons.
Ukraine's most powerful friend remains the United States, and after a round of successful talks, the US president said he believed Ukraine could defeat Russia and take back the land it has lost since the full-scale invasion in 2022. Zelenskyy said he was a little bit surprised by Trump's statement.
Yesterday we had a good meeting with President Trump, and of course we count on the United States. I appreciate the support we are receiving.
Kyiv residents DW spoke to were unconvinced whether Trump's positive stance would hold.
It's not the first time he's changed his mind. His mood changes often. I don't think it will be the last.
The thing is that Trump's moods change more often than my wife's, so I can't comment on anything. I don't even take it into account because it's so unstable.
But they were acutely aware of how crucial US support is to Ukraine's battlefield success.
Without Trump's help, it's unrealistic to get the land back, I think. If Ukraine is denied aid, it's impossible.
Yes, they are important meetings. It is important that Ukraine continues to be supported. Without support, Ukraine will not survive.
The talks are important, but the main thing is that they're effective, not just talks. Russia played down Trump's statement, saying it was only because Zelenskyy had his ear.
They had a meeting yesterday. We understand that Trump heard Zelenskyy's version of events. And as far as we can tell, that's the story Trump's accepting.
For now, Ukraine appears to have the full support of its powerful friend with weapons.
I'm now joined by William Courtney. He's adjunct senior fellow at the RAND think tank and a former U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So, Volodymyr Zelenskyy told the UN that there are no guarantees, only friends and weapons. What message exactly was he trying to send to Ukraine's international partners?
Well, a good example to compare is South Korea. South Korea has a very strong army to defend against and deter aggression from North Korea, and it has U.S. and other allied forces on the ground in South Korea ready to fight if North Korea invades. In other words, these are foreign forces that are not far away from the fighting, but they're expected to be in the fighting right away if North Korea invades. Those are the kind of security guarantees that Ukraine needs. It needs a very strong army, which it does have, and if there are going to be foreign forces, which really are important for security for Ukraine, they need to be forward in Ukraine, not hanging back in the western part of Ukraine. They need to be integrated with Ukrainian forces in such a way that they can reinforce each other's combat power.
Now, U.S. President Trump seems to have once again shifted his support to Ukraine, and that's a move that caught many off guard, including Zelenskyy himself. But is there any reason to think that we could see a real change in U.S. policy?
Thus far, there does not seem to be a change. What President Trump basically said was that Europe and Ukraine have the lead in this issue, and the United States is standing back. Well, that's consistent with what we've seen for a number of months now. Since the Trump administration came to office, no new military assistance has been voted by Congress for Ukraine, and the Trump administration has imposed no new sanctions on Russia. And several times President Trump has said that if his peacemaking efforts fail, he will pull back. He seems to be continuing to pull back, and especially after the fiasco in Alaska, where President Trump really made some concessions that caused some criticism in Washington. President Trump might be just wanting to pull back.
So would you agree with what some critics have said, that this is more just a rhetorical attempt to shift the burden away from Washington and direct the burden of success more towards Ukraine and Europe?
It is partly that. Certainly, if President Trump, Trump administration are not going to be more active in helping Ukraine, then it really does depend on Ukraine, first of all, and its European allies and partners. But secondly, it's also a vote of confidence in some sense, because the Europeans really are stepping up really quite dramatically compared to where they were at the beginning of the full-scale war 3.5 years ago. So the Europeans and the Ukrainians together are really setting the pace now for Western policy on Ukraine.
So would you agree with President Trump then that there is reason to think that Ukraine could make achieve some type of forward motion and actually decide this conflict moving forward in their favor?
Yes, there is a possibility of that. It's difficult to make any prediction about military activities, but Ukraine's defense industry has blossomed faster than anyone expected. Ukraine really, in the drone area especially, has been the leader. The Europeans are stepping up their military assistance quite significantly to Ukraine. So they have a lot of potential. What is particularly important from the U.S. side is providing satellite-based intelligence, which enables Ukraine to be able to target military targets and war supporting industry in Russia, and the Patriot missile defense system, because it's the only Western missile defense system that can hit and destroy Russian ballistic missiles that are coming at Ukraine.
All right, that was William Courtney, Senior Fellow at the Iran think tank. Thank you very much for your expertise.
You're quite welcome.
For more on Trump's comments about the war in Ukraine, I'm joined by Volker, former U.S. ambassador to NATO and special representative for Ukraine negotiations. Mr. Volker, welcome back to DW. Now, what was your first reaction when you heard what President Trump wrote about Ukraine?
Well, I thought it was amusing because clearly what he's doing is he is trying to troll President Putin of Russia. He's criticizing the Russian economy, saying it's in terrible shape. He's criticizing the military, saying they're not a great power, that any good military would have defeated Ukraine in a week, and here they are struggling after 3 years, saying that Ukraine should take all its territory back and maybe even more. So I think what he's doing here is he's trying to get under Putin's skin because he is frustrated that Putin is not making any effort to end the war. What was also interesting in that Truth Social post is that he wasn't taking any responsibility himself or for the United States. He was basically waving at Europe and Ukraine and saying, good luck.
President Zelenskyy, nonetheless, did hail this as a big shift. That's, in your opinion, then not what this is.
Well, I would say it is a shift because his rhetoric in the past had been much more negative toward Ukraine. If you think back to that meeting in February in the Oval Office, Trump was saying, you don't have any cards. Well, now he's saying that he's reviewed the economic and military situation and he thinks that Ukraine can win. So that is a shift from President Trump's side.
Is it a meaningful shift,
but
or is it just him flip-flopping again?
Well, you know, it's meaningful in terms of attitude, but it is not meaningful in terms of U.S. action because he's still not indicating that he's going to put tough sanctions in place on Russia or secondary sanctions. He's not providing any additional support to Ukraine other than what European allies are going to buy and provide. So he's not offering anything. So I don't think it is significant in terms of the U.S. policy posture, but at least Trump's attitude and his comments there are encouraging and probably encouraging for European allies as well.
You mentioned that you think it's Trump trying to get under Putin's skin. He repeatedly said in recent days that he thought that the Ukraine war would be the easiest conflict for him to solve precisely because of that good relationship he has with Vladimir Putin. Could this then be a negotiating tactic, getting under Putin's skin to what end?
Yeah, to get him to actually negotiate an end to the war. We haven't seen that yet. And I think that Trump still wants to get a deal. He wants the Nobel Peace Prize, of course, but he also wants to be able to lift sanctions and start doing business with Russia. He's talked a lot about minerals, oil, gas, Arctic exploration. So Trump sees that as very desirable, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so he really wants to get Putin engaged in ending the war. Putin, for his part, I think he understands that that is what Trump wants. So he dangles that kind of cooperation in front of him without actually taking any steps to end the war. I don't think Putin is motivated by the business deals at all. He's motivated by rebuilding the Russian Empire.
How do you think this post and the tone went down with European leaders and NATO allies here in Europe?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think most European allies were happy to see this. It's a relief to have something as close to the real situation as possible, but also everyone holding their breath because who knows, tomorrow he may do the opposite again. And so everyone is pleased with what they saw, but also not convinced that this is a major change.
Mm-hmm. I want to look at how realistic what he claimed in that Truth Social post is, and something that the Ukrainian leader, of course, embraced, and it emboldened him today when he spoke in front of the United Nations. Trump stressed that Ukraine could win all its territory back with the support of Europe, but even at the height of U.S. support, that was an unattainable goal. Militarily, how far is Ukraine right now from being able to seize everything that's currently under Russian military control?
Right. So first off, I don't believe there ever was a time when we had a height of American military support. The Biden administration was always holding back, both in terms of the types of weapons and equipment we would provide, their use, their range, the timing of deliveries. So we never had a height of American support. As far as Ukraine being able to win, this is in the context of the way the war has changed over 3.5 years. Russia now is considerably weaker than it was in February of 22. And Ukraine is, I would argue, considerably stronger than it was in February of 22. They have developed a whole new way of warfare using drones. They are producing them domestically in Ukraine and in very large numbers. And their economy is more stable, thanks to European support, than Russia's. Russia has very high inflation, very high interest rates, a labor shortage, unsustainable casualty rates. They've destroyed a lot of their military equipment and are dependent on Iran for drones and North Korea for artillery shells. So Russia is in a weaker position. If this trend continues, and particularly if we can dry up the flow of hard currency to Russia to pay for the war effort, it is possible for Ukraine to win.
Mm-hmm. Trump ended his post by wishing both countries well. What does that tell us about which side he's on here?
Well, that's sort of his general closing. Normally when he writes a tweet, he says, thank you for your attention to this matter. It is I'd say fairly empty closing, fairly tongue-in-cheek as well. In this case, I think he's referring to the Russian people and the Ukrainian people. And he does have a sympathy for the young people who are losing their lives in this war. So he wishes everybody well, and he wants Russia to be a normal, successful country, just that they're not that under Vladimir Putin. And I think the overall tone of that post, however, was to be much more supportive of Ukraine and condemning Russia for the invasion and the continued war.
That's Kurt Volker, former U.S. ambassador to NATO. Thank you so much for your insights and your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.